growing up as a kid, yeah. All a nigga wanna have was a Burberry scarf and $3 in my pocket. Instead I got beat with a switch, but I don't give a fuck, but it's on my body. Scars all up on me, but I run around from.
So I want to talk about the sad truth about Matthew Stafford. Now, this video will probably offend a lot of Lions fans. It may sound dark. It may sound harsh. But the truth of the matter is that Matthew Stafford may be one of the greatest wasted talents in NFL history. It's not because he's not a great quarterback. Matthew Stafford is a really good quarterback. But it's because of the organization that he got drafted to and him not having a great coaching staff. And you see, when you ask somebody about Matthew Stafford who isn't a Detroit Lions fan, most of the time, 90% of them say that Matthew Stafford is one of the most overrated quarterbacks in NFL history. They say Matthew Stafford has all these great stats, but he doesn't have a great win-loss record, and he's 0-3 in the playoffs. And listen, wins and losses don't always fall the majority of the time on the quarterback. Most of the time that falls on the team and the coaching staff, especially when you get inside the playoffs. You see, ever since Matthew Stafford got drafted by the Detroit Lions, he has had to be Superman. He has had to carry the Detroit Lions to the playoffs. And the fact that Matthew Stafford has had to be Superman for the Detroit Lions goes to show you that Matthew Stafford has never had a great coach. Because you see, the great coaches don't overly rely on their star quarterback to have to carry the load. Why you think Tom Brady has all Super Bowls he has? Great quarterback, but he has Bill Belichick. Look at Big Ben. Big Ben had Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin. Look at Eli Manning. Tom Coughlin is a future Hall of Fame coach. What do you think separates Phillip Rivers from the rest of those guys? Hall of Famer, but doesn't have a ring. You want to know why? Because he hasn't had a great coach. And that's the sad reality that Matthew Stafford has failed into. You see, here's the thing. As a good quarterback like Matthew Stafford is, you can easily carry your team, if you're in a weak or okay division, to the playoffs. But once you get to the playoffs, it's a whole entirely different animal. I've never seen a great quarterback carry his team to the playoffs. Ever. With a bad head coach. You never seen a bad head coach in NFL history win a Super Bowl. Ever. Now, give you half your outliers like your Ken Whisenhunts of the world, when he had Kurt Warner and things like that. But sometimes you just get a perfect storm. You do have a little bit of outliers out there. But the majority of the time, those coaches don't win Super Bowls. And just because you have a great quarterback doesn't guarantee you a Super Bowl. You see, it's a reason why you don't have to have an elite quarterback to win the Super Bowl, but you got to have an elite coach to win the Super Bowl. You see there? Because the elite coaches who don't have those great quarterbacks, they got to actually strategize because they know that their quarterback, they can't overly rely on their quarterback to do too much. But those great quarterbacks that basically carry their teams and carry their coaches, they don't win a lot of championships. Look at Aaron Rodgers, for example. And we're not talking about after Aaron Rodgers won the Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers in 2010, he had to carry the Green Bay Packers. I find it funny. The year Aaron Rodgers said, we're going to run the table and we're going to make it to the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers ran the table, got Green Bay into the playoffs, and you guys tell me how far did Green Bay get? Aaron Rodgers had one of the best seasons we ever seen in the history of an NFL quarterback. Ran the table, got Green Bay into the playoffs, and tell me what happened. Did Green Bay get far into the playoffs? No, they did not. Did they win the Super Bowl? No, they did not. I'm trying to tell you, Aaron Rodgers is a great example of that. Mike McCarthy is a great example of how coaches get complacent when they have elite quarterbacks. When you don't have an elite quarterback and you have a quarterback like a Joe Flacco, you tend not to get overly complacent on him because you know he does have limitations and it is things that he can't do. That's why you build a great offense around him. But when you're in a situation like Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, and Deshaun Watson, you basically say, hey, we're going to give you the keys, and we need you to carry us to the Super Bowl, basically. And that doesn't happen. Because eventually you're going to find a coach that's going to neutralize your quarterback, neutralize your weakness, and force you to make adjustments and force other players on that team to step up. And they simply can't. And that has been the situation that Matthew Stafford has failed into. Now, given Matthew Stafford isn't all excuse from the blame, he has had some poor performances in big games. He did have one playoff game that he didn't perform it particularly well in. But other than that, most of the time, Matthew Stafford is in the same category as a Deshaun Watson and a Phillip Rivers. Bad coaching. Now, although Phillip Rivers has had most of the time Phillip Rivers gets inside the playoffs, doesn't do all that great. Good coach or no coach, Phillip Rivers hasn't really been all that great historically in the playoffs. But he doesn't have a coach that has actually been good that I can actually remember off the top of my head. So when you look at Matthew Stafford, if you got to be Superman for your team, that just means you don't have a great coaching staff. Because when you have a great coach isn't going to allow their star quarterback that have to be Superman, that have to bail them out time in and time out. Why do you think the Houston Texans are the only team in the past decade in the AFC South to not have been to an AFC championship game? And we made jokes about how bad the AFC South has been and how the AFC South is one of the worst divisions in the NFL. But one thing about the AFC South is that every team other than the Houston Texans has been to an AFC championship game in the past decade. The Titans, the Colts, even the freaking Jaguars. The freaking Jacksonville Jaguars. And guess what? The Jacksonville Jaguars will greatly coach the year they went to the AFC Championship game. They went to the AFC Championship game with Blake freaking Bortles. Blake freaking Bortles. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? That should tell you everything that you need to know. You see, the teams that are greatly coached are the teams that have the most success in the playoffs and are the teams that win the Super Bowls. And the teams that have the great quarterbacks but don't have the great coaches are the teams that don't win the Super Bowls. Look at Aaron Rodgers after he won his Super Bowl in 2010. Carried Green Bay. I will never forget the year Green Bay went to the AFC Championship game and they got absolutely dominated and blown out by the Atlanta Falcons. Aaron Rodgers carried them to that point. And you want to know why they didn't get to the Super Bowl that year? You want to know why I picked the Atlanta Falcons to win that game? Because I never trusted Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy got complacent with Aaron Rodgers. He relied on Aaron Rodgers too much. Green Bay relied on Aaron Rodgers too much. Even their front office is to blame because they didn't give him a great defense. They didn't give him the pieces around him to be successful. They just said, Aaron, we're going to give you the keys, and we need you to drive us to the Super Bowl. And that just doesn't work in the playoffs. If you want to win in the playoffs, you got to have a good coach. You see, Robert Saleh, in an interview a couple of weeks ago, said that football is about a game of inches. And it's not just all about the players. It's about the game of inches. It's about the judgments. And it is about attention to detail. Every small detail matters. Every single small detail matters. Every single one. That's what separates the coaches like Bill Belichick. Why do you think Bill Belichick has won the most Super Bowls in the past 2 decades than any other team in the NFL? You want to know why? Because he is a great coach. Now, everybody likes to give all the success to Tom Brady. But if Tom Brady was playing for the Detroit Lions, would he have won the Super Bowl? Absolutely not. So why Matthew Stafford and Tom Brady? And tell me one of those guys. Tell me Matthew Stafford wouldn't have won the Super Bowl with Bill Belichick. Look at Big Ben. Big Ben has played with 2 great coaches, Mike Tomlin and Bill Cowher. 2 Hall of Fame coaches. So you see, coaching matters. And I know a lot of you guys get tired of me hearing these rants and almost every single video is about coaching. But I'd say this because a lot of you average NFL fans just get tied to players. But the diehard NFL fans like me and the other guys that watch the NFL and know the game of football and don't get tied to players and understand how much it means to have a good coach, understands that if you want to win a Super Bowl, it doesn't matter how great of a quarterback you have if you don't have a good coach. You see, I look at teams like the Houston Texans as frauds because we know regardless, because of how great their quarterback is, that they're going to make it to the playoffs. But we know that once they get to the playoffs, they're not going to make it far because they don't have a great coach at all. They had too many weaknesses. And just having a great quarterback just hides so many weaknesses of their team, or just having the quarterback that good of that magnitude is able to hide some of those weaknesses. But eventually, it's an old saying. I don't know who made this saying, but the fake get exposed. And in Matthew Stafford's case, the Detroit Lions got exposed every single year they made it to the playoffs. Matthew Stafford was able to carry Detroit to the playoffs, and the Detroit Lions still got exposed because they didn't have great coaches. And I love Jim Caldwell. You guys know I love me some Jim Caldwell, but Jim Caldwell wasn't able to make those adjustments in those games, in those big games and in the playoffs. Got too overly dependent on Matthew Stafford. And maybe it's because he coached Peyton Manning. But I mean, look, the sad truth about Matthew Stafford is that Matthew Stafford is a great quarterback. He's a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, but he will probably never make it to the Hall of Fame because he doesn't have the postseason success. And that is a sad story about Matthew Stafford. If you want to win in the NFL, doesn't matter how good of a quarterback you are, you got to have a good coach. And that is just the fact of the matter, and that is the sad truth about Matthew Stafford.